Welcome to the Final Frontiers radio show, where we spotlight inspiring missionary endeavors around the globe. Stay tuned to hear how you can personally get involved, helping the Lord's frontline soldiers effectively advance the gospel where it has never been preached before. In this episode, you'll be hearing the first of our roundtable discussions here at Final Frontiers, our topic today being the last unreached tribe in Honduras. We'll also have Dennis Ellis back with us, sharing some of the hardships he experienced in Russia. And we'll have an interview with American missionary Phyllis Stirewalt, the wife of our national director in the city of Eldoret in Kenya, Africa.
Hi, I'm Daniel Nelms, and I'm here with John Nelms and Josh Martin. And today we're going to be talking about a special project that we're doing in Honduras to reach the Tulapan Indians.
Well, the Tulapan have been known in Honduras for quite some time as the last unreached tribal group there. They have had some exposure to the gospel. We've been going there for the last probably 4 or 5 years, preaching and so forth, helping them out. But still, the majority of the people live up in the mountains, and they've had no exposure to the gospel whatsoever.
This is something really exciting, I think, for me, because dealing with places where there's uncontacted or unreached gets me excited. For 6 years, Jason and I went after just that one group in Peru, and you see how those people live, you see the poverty that these people live in. And so seeing this in Peru, seeing it in India, but getting to see it in Honduras is really a neat thing for me.
And not only are these people unreached by the gospel, they're also unreached by basic things such as medical care and even education. And sadly, it's estimated that over 80% of the Tulapan are illiterate, meaning that even if we did bring them the printed Bible, they wouldn't be able to read it.
Yeah, some of them are learning Spanish now, and the Tulapans are divided into 2 subgroups, each group having their own chief in their own, quote, capital city, which is more like a capital village. And there's a school in each one of those for teaching the young children Spanish. But the adults, particularly the women, don't speak Spanish at all. They speak their own language called Tol. And many of the men speak a little bit of Spanish. It's what we call here Spanglish, except it's a mixture of Tol and Spanish. So even though the Bible is printed in Spanish, which they would have access to, they can afford it, most of them would not be able to read it because they're either illiterate or they don't know Spanish well enough.
And are these schools, they're not really available to those who live way up in the mountains, are they?
No, only for those who live in the, quote, capital villages. I know like in one of them there's probably 50 students, and in the other one maybe 40 or 50, something like that.
So the idea is to bring the gospel to them in a way that they can understand it, which is why we're going to be sending down our Power Pack Dynamos. These are self-contained audio Bible units. They could be charged by leaving them out in the sun or by cranking them by hand. And we're going to be giving out these to every single household.
And usually there's going to be 3, 4, 5, or 6 families living in one household. Now, when you say that, you think, well, they must have big houses to live in. And they really don't. They have typically a 2-room house that might be 400 square feet or something like that. They all sleep on the floor. And when the night's over, you don't hang around in the house. You go outside, you're working in the fields, you're washing clothes in the river or whatever. So they're all crowded in together. One unit then will be able to be heard by, say, up to 6 family units, which may be 25 or 30 people.
Sure. So maybe it'll be less correct to say a household and more correct to say a sleeping structure.
Well, that might be good.
A group tent.
So the first time going out to try to do this, then we would be taking these audio devices and hiking up through the mountains. Most of these are, how many kilometers away from each other, some of these small
I believe
villages?
it was upwards between 5 and 8 kilometers apart, up in the mountains at high elevations. And all this is going to be done on foot. There are no real roads. We can't take 4-wheel drive vehicles.
We had originally thought about doing it with some mules, too, just to carry some extra supplies. But demographics, I mean, we're going to try to find out exactly, pinpointing where they're at. They have a map on the wall that we talked about, and we've got national preachers there ready to go, and we'd like to be able to map out for ourselves with the GPS exactly where they're at, get an idea of how poor they are, what kind of water needs and food needs and medical needs that they might have. So we want to go in and take a sweep through this entire mountainous area.
While delivering these Bibles.
Exactly.
And we also work with the Google Mapping Project. So not only will we be going up to these places, but we'll also be putting them all on the map with this information so that anybody in the world can access it later on.
There is, for the Tulapan now, a health clinic which the Honduran government built. And I think 3 years ago, we added on to it by building a maternity ward because so many of their ladies were dying giving birth. Starvation is a big problem up there. And usually in the months of June, July, they're out of food. And the first time I met them, sitting there in a room talking to them, there were 3 men sitting off to the side, maybe 4 feet away from me. And they told me that all 3 of those men had buried their wives in the last couple of weeks. I asked them why, and they said starvation.
Wow.
There wasn't enough food for everybody, so the mothers were voluntarily not eating so that the children could have food, and the father could be left alive to hopefully continue providing for them. So, they grow tomatoes by Honduras farmers that come up there and kind of acquire their land, and they hire them to work it. It's almost like a slavery type thing, but not. So they might have an abundance of tomatoes, but that's all they've got, and you can't survive just on eating tomatoes. Sometimes all they have to eat is coffee beans. So we go in there, and the way we got in good with them was rather than going up to them and giving them something, which is what groups often do, I went and met the 2 chiefs, and I asked them, what do you need? And they were so impressed that we would take the time to ask for their input that it solidified our relationship. Now, both of those men have died in the last few years. One of them was, I think, 116 or 118 when he died. But I've now met the 2 men who've taken over after them, and one of them wants to be trained in the ministry. He's offered to use his home as a house church. He lives high up in the mountains. And a lot of the people who live up in the mountains have no electricity, running water. They still wear the tribal costumes, which look like what we call an old croaker sack here in the South. Like they cut a hole in it for a head and the arms, and they tie a string around their waist. They're very, very primitive people once you get up into the mountains. But you said before, we are going to be doing it. I want to clarify that. I'm not going to be going up in those mountains. You might be doing it, but there's me going would turn a 1-month trip into a 3-year trip.
We are hoping to do this in about 1 month, and I have one other guy that I've been talking to for a long time, and we may have more people, we don't know, but it's going to take 1 month of intense hiking.
Yeah. Well, I'll stay down below and pray for you.
We appreciate that. We're going to need it. Small amounts of food and cold and rain and a lot of hiking.
Yeah, and anybody listening who would like to go along, just contact us. We give you all the details, and you don't have to be there the entire month, but if you're the type of crazy person who likes to do extraneous, stressful
Hiking,
going without
survival.
good food, drinking water out of the creek, it'll be heaven on earth for you.
Now, I was told in the beginning that if they even see a white person, they will probably burn their village and leave.
Yeah, they do, and most of their villages are going to be like 3 to 5 houses. The reason they live up in the mountains, it's a protected area by the government. You have to get the Honduran government's permission to go in, and then the tribal permission, and we've got it all. But the reason they're up there is because when Columbus landed in Honduras in 1502, shortly after him came the conquistadors, and they destroyed the local tribal people, raping, murdering, cutting their hands off, things like that. So some of them fled up to the mountains. And that's who these people are. They're the descendants of those who fled to the mountains. But because they have no contact with the outside world, they think the conquistadors are still doing that.
Right.
Anyone white man.
White or even a
man.
Latino man. Anyone who's not an Indian, when they hear that you're coming up the mountains, they just burn their house, burn their crops, anything they've got, and they head on further up into the mountains to try to get away from the conquistadors. It's incredible.
I thought it was so interesting when you talked about the history, some of the history that you had heard from that man who was over 100 years old, about, they said, we lost the way. Could you talk just a little bit about that? Do you remember how you said this man would come to the edge of the mountains and he would call out to them?
Yeah, when I tried to witness him, first of all, that particular chief was named Cipriano. And we still take care of his family as an honor to him, his wife, and orphans. But I asked them about, did their forefathers know about the gospel? And they said that they had 2 gods that they worshiped, a good God and a bad God. I don't remember all the details, unfortunately. But he said it was very easy to tell the difference between the good and the bad. But the way that they knew what to do was they say they would go up to a certain mountaintop and look across it to another mountaintop where there was a little valley, a little crevice between it, and you could scream from one side to the other. And that a man would show up there, and he would tell them when it was time to plant their corn, when it was time to harvest their corn, when it's time to do this, do that. And he said as long as we would obey what he told us to do, it worked. But if we ever deviated, it wouldn't work. So I asked him, did you ever meet this guy? No, I never met him. We had this separation between us. But they believed that he was a messenger from the good God. So he said, in time, our forefathers stopped worshiping the bad God altogether. But we didn't know anything about the good God to know how to properly worship him. So they had waited for some time. Now, to be honest, Cipriano, when he was a young man, say 50 or 60 years old, he was led to Christ by a Baptist missionary. Later, after preaching the gospel to his own people, or trying to, the Catholic priest got upset and had him thrown in jail. And when the Baptist missionary heard about it, he went and bailed him out and began to teach him a little bit more. But unfortunately, he was never taught how to evangelize and what to do with the converts after you evangelize them. So there's no discipleship. So you might say that Christianity started with Cipriano and it ended with Cipriano until we went in and started preaching to them and giving them more of the gospel. They were very excited to receive it. And even now, they all want to hear it. When they hear you're coming to visit them, there's hundreds of people that come out to see you.
I know now with like the visionary trips and everything, I hear testimonies of how they'll go out there and they'll hike up to that area and spend time in that one first village on the edge, and all the women will bring baskets and everything, trying to make some money.
Handmade baskets, yeah. They haven't yet learned to diversify the types of baskets they make, so you got 50 women all trying to sell you the exact same basket. And how many baskets of one shape and size do you need? But it takes them 3 or 4 days, I think, to make a basket. And that's how they earn a living.
Yeah, and there's not a lot of tourists coming to this place either, so it's very difficult for these people. People will come in truckloads of goods to sell, and oftentimes they kind of rip the people off. So these guys, they're really abused and taken advantage of a lot.
There are a lot of church groups that have gone up, and you can see them on the internet. But what they do is there's a ball field up there, and they'll go and play soccer with the kids and then pass out a track. And so they'll come back and say, we've reached the tulip pond. Well, that's like throwing a track out of your window on top of the Empire State Building and saying you've reached New York City. I mean, you gave a witness, but you haven't reached anybody yet. We've been going there for at least 4 or 5 years. We haven't reached them either. You're going to have to get to their villages. But fortunately, when we go, we're going to be carrying audio Bibles that also have a gospel presentation on them, so that even after we're gone, a month later, a year later, 2 years later, all they got to do is power the thing up, turn it on, and they've got another witness for them.
And we have 2 national preachers willing to go into this area?
We have 2 Honduran pastors who are eager to go there. They'll take turns going up every other week to preach and to teach in a Bible Institute that we'll start for them. They'll use a unified curriculum so one guy knows where he's supposed to be at each week. And then they'll train these tulip pond men who want to be preachers to go out and evangelize and disciple, and we'll give them the discipleship material to use.
So we've got everything planned out. What we need to get this project rolling is about $27,000, and that's going to provide, every household is going to get their own power pack dynamo. And so just pray about that, and if you think you can help us with that, visit our website at finalfrontiers.world.
If you're a Bible college student with a passion for missions, but maybe unsure whether you're actually called to full-time service on the field, Final Frontiers has a month-long summer program in Honduras to give you that boost of opportunity you need to understanding the real world of missions. This summer internship provides hands-on training from real American and national missionaries, as well as a true immersion in third world ministry experience. Whether you're a student or a Bible college looking for hands-on field training, if you're interested in this opportunity, please visit us at finalfrontiers.world.
I'm John Nelms, and I'm here with Brother Dennis Ellis, who's been involved in our ministry for a long time. And Dennis had been in Russia for quite a long time and became our director for that region. And we're honored today to have him here in our studios with us. They're now based here out of the United States, speaking in churches, raising support for national preachers. What challenges did you personally face trying to spread the gospel while you were in Russia?
When I first went there, John, in 92, it took me 2 days of buying groceries to buy enough food for my family. There was nothing. The shelves were empty. Most Russians were not communists, but it was just a principality over Russia in those years. So life was very difficult. It was unsafe. Renegade Orthodox priests got on TV saying kill missionaries, even though the Orthodox priests did not teach that, the ones that were educated. There was no medical care. If you wanted to have a minor surgery, you had to go out on the streets and buy your own sutures, your own needles to give to the doctors. They had nothing to work with. By the way, a doctor then made equivalent to American dollars, $8 a month, the top doctors in Russia. And then the old communist philosophies was still in the older people, like when I would go to get a Russian visa, it was unbearable. And we began praying and asked God to give favor. And God in each office would give us favor with one person that would help take care of us. But it was not an easy thing. I saw my men being arrested. I've been picked up on the borders, my car confiscated. I don't talk about that because there was so much good stuff that was happening, but it was not an easy trip. And towards the end, every time we got on the radio, we had a radio program I've shared with you that went into 10 million Russians' homes. It was a call-in program. I preached the gospel, then 30-minute call-in. They called from Moscow all the way to St. Petersburg. But I was listened to by the KGB every time to see if I said anything negative against the Russian Federation. But praise God, one night the phone rang in the office where the DJ was, and he came in to me and he said, "You won't believe who called the station." I said, "Well, I don't know. I wouldn't know anyway. I don't speak that good of Russian." He said, "The KGB officer that listens to you every Tuesday night at 8 o'clock called for me to tell you in private that now he believes like you believe."
Isn't that something?
He received the Lord. He said, "Don't expose me. I'll lose my job." But he said, "I've listened to you and I've received Jesus Christ." That's just the way it was. It was like there was no resistance to the Holy Spirit, but the system resisted us every day.
Well, I used to hear that the persecution in Russia, though it was carried out by the government, it was really pushed by the Orthodox Church, and that the government more or less yielded to the desires of the Orthodox Church. Is that correct in your estimation? And is that what's happening now?
Yes, when we were invited, my first visa was by Alexei II, Patriarch of Russia. That opened doors for us everywhere. But he looked at us as a Christian organization that would, like I said, start businesses in the church. When they found out who we really were, that we were planting churches, they immediately canceled my visas. God gave us another. I taught in a very high prestigious business and law school that gave me visas until I was married, and then I had citizens' rights. They were instrumental. Now, Father Igor never felt like that. But one of his, we call them altar boys, but they call them altar men. He was older than I am, came to me and he said, "Dennis, your friendship with Father Igor is going to cost him his life." And I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "He's going against everything that the Orthodox believe, and you are evangelical Christian, and Orthodox feel like that you're the enemy." And I went and studied their history, and I understand they think they're the third movement or the third right after the Ottoman Empire, and that they will conquer the world. I didn't know that. And he said, "You are an obstacle in Russia for them controlling this nation, and you've put him in a dangerous place." And I said, "Well, I'll back off then," because we were together all the time. He was just on fire for Jesus, preached grace in his Orthodox church. Wow. Sadly, before I left, he mysteriously died of a heart problem that he never had, and the people there feel like that his death was not accidental. But we would go to villages, and the Orthodox would organize and have signs that were so ugly. And all I would say in those early days, I'd say, "I don't understand. Alexei II invited me here, and you're treating me like trash." "Alexei invited you?" They would kiss my hands, get down in the ground and kiss my feet. We were wide open in any village we went, Orthodox villages, and we'd go there, and hundreds, sometimes thousands, would receive Jesus Christ. So God even used Alexei II, without him knowing it, to spread the gospel in Russia.
Well, now you were pastoring of a huge church, planting others, training men for the ministry, starting businesses. We as Americans would think you must have been living pretty high on the hog. Can you tell us how you lived, you and Katya, what your home was like?
When Katya and I got married, she had 2 rooms, not a 2-room apartment, 2 rooms. We lived in a communal apartment with alcoholics. I would get up in the morning to shave and go to the bathroom, and our neighbor would be in the bathroom urinating all over the walls because he couldn't find the commode. We had to have the refrigerator in our bedroom because he would steal all the food out of the refrigerator. And at that time, we had 4 hungry boys. We both were single parents. Imagine now having 4 boys in 2 rooms, and I don't mean big, giant rooms. I mean little bitty rooms where you could reach. In my office, finally, I could sit at my desk and touch the wall behind me. That's how big the rooms were. And I had a pastor here, bless his heart, and I love him. He said, "Dennis is in Russia getting wealthy. He's a millionaire." Well, I was. In rubles, I had over 1 million rubles. But it took about that many to go buy groceries one time because of inflation. So Yeltsin was smart enough. He took off the last 3 zeros on all the currency, and we didn't have to carry as much. Towards the end, there was food to buy, but Katya, bless her, she carried bags like all of them did from the stores every day after work. I said, you'll never have to do that. I'll do it. But I didn't know what I was doing. If I saw somebody near a product buying it, I said, it has to be good. I'd just buy it. I'd bring it home, and I won't even tell you some of the things I bought. But food became more plentiful, but people still didn't have money.
But you were always having to share your apartment with other families also. It wasn't like it was your apartment. It was your room in an apartment.
Later on, when Yeltsin very wisely let people privatize their apartments, that's what started the economic boom. Russia has probably one of the strongest economies in Europe, and certainly the most modern city in Europe is St. Petersburg. But that was just the life that they lived. We finally was able to privatize those 2 rooms and sell it, and I took all my retirement. When I came back to the States, we had nothing to retire on. We took that and added it to what we had and bought a little 800 square feet apartment, and we thought we had died and gone to heaven. It was great. In those early years, I had 3 full-time staff and 6 part-time staff, and we paid the salary of all those out of our support. Wow. And I began seeking somebody that would come alongside us and help us, and somebody mentioned your name, and I began to research in those early years. And you personally took on one of our pastors, and then you took on another one in Siberia, and you helped some more. And that's how we saw this is the way to do it. God just arrested us. And that's when I came here and met, and I said, man, I wanted to do what you're doing, but nobody could improve on the way you do it. Can I come alongside of you full time?
Well, there's plenty who think they can improve on it.
Oh, yeah. It wasn't me. So we've been with you full time now for quite a number of years.
I just knew we wanted to support some guys in Russia because at age 12, I felt that God was calling me to go to Russia as a missionary.
I wished you to come.
And so, well, I tried. I contacted Brother Andrew, a God smuggler.
Yeah.
Before I enrolled in Bible college, and he told me, we'd love to have your help, but go to Bible college first. Yeah. And there in Bible college, I kind of got sidetracked to working in assistant pastor or pastorate position in America, just waiting for God to show me where to go. And now, 31 and a half years later, being in missions, almost 2 million miles of flying, over 50 countries I've been in, I've never stepped foot in Russia.
John, nobody could replace what you've done. I call you in conferences Mr. Missions, but at the Bema, we'll all understand.
Well, I want to thank you for sharing all this with us today. I think it'll be a blessing to our listeners. We look forward to having you back again at another time. You and Katya both.
It's been our privilege, and we love you, John, and God has elevated this to the largest church planting organization in the United States and maybe the world. But it takes a man with a vision.
Well, he empowers us to do all we do, and then he keeps us unknown by everybody else so we don't get the big head. That way he gets all the glory for it.
And it maybe keeps the enemy from finding out where we're at to attack us.
That's right. We just sneak behind the enemy lines and do the damage. But God bless you, Dennis.
Thank you for this privilege.
Your inquiries and comments are important to us. If you have questions or perhaps subject matter you would like to have addressed on this show, please visit us at finalfrontiers.world.
The tithes and offerings mentioned in the New Testament had a specific purpose. The birth of the church was still recent, and there was not yet any church buildings. In fact, it would be about 300 more years before the first structure, built specifically for the use of Christian worship, would be erected. It would be another 1,100 years after that before someone would think to provide seats for the worshipers. Some say that because of this, it is unbiblical to have worship facilities, but they are wrong. Neither Jesus nor the early church had air conditioning, PA systems, recorded music, or youth pastors. They also didn't have microwaves, toilets, or cars. So if you want to criticize those who worship in a church building, you might want to do it while denouncing the other modern conveniences that we all enjoy today. But to the point, if there were no buildings to erect or remodel, then what were the tithes and offerings used for? We read in the book of Acts and throughout the epistles that the monetary gifts of God's people were used specifically for three things. 1, taking care of the widows and orphans. 2, helping those in prison and in dire need. And 3, to provide wages and assistance for God's ministerial servants, not just for pastors in the local church, but also for the missionaries to be sent worldwide to establish local churches. 3 John refers to this. Does this mean that it is unbiblical to spend our tithes primarily on real estate and construction? No. However, it would suggest that it is contrary to God's intended purposes if our giving is spent primarily on the organization, the facilities, and the programs, while failing to provide funds enough or funds at all on what it was intended to be used for. How tragic when a congregation claims they cannot afford to pay their own pastor, or they cannot afford to give or give more to missions because they have an indebtedness to an in-house project that consumes their offerings. How can we say we are doing something for the glory of God when we intentionally deny His express purposes for those funds in doing so? I'm John Nelms. To learn more about missions, order a copy of my book, The Great Omission, on our website at finalfrontiers.world.
Greetings, this is Joshua Martin, and today on the phone I have Phyllis Stirewalt, the wife of Randy Stirewalt. They work in Kenya, Africa as missionaries, and I got to be there a couple of years ago and visit with her, and I got to stay with both of them. I traveled with Randy to many places, but I saw her hard work and everything that she did. She's got a cold today. Her throat's a little bit sore, but she's still willing to talk to us, so it's good to hear from you, Phyllis.
Hi.
Hi.
Good to talk to you again. You need to come and see us.
Yeah, that would be fun. Some of the preachers are like Cosmas Atita. He keeps in touch with me a lot.
Well, that's good. He likes to keep in touch with everybody.
Yeah, he certainly does. It seems like he's got a lot of people praying for him.
Yeah, well, we all need that, don't we?
I was wondering if you could actually talk on here, tell our listeners what you told me about how you have this one other ministry besides what you do there, where you buy like toys and trinkets, bracelets, things like that, and you take it back to the United States. You try to sell those and bring income back to help with the ministry.
Yes, I do that.
Could you talk about that, what you're doing there?
Well, what I do with that money, the funds that are made from that, is pay school fees for our children whose father were pastors that have died.
Right.
So that they can stay in school. The mothers here, widows, they really don't have any money or any source of income to educate their children. So that's what I've been doing for a number of years, and seeing that each and every child finishes Form 4, which is high school.
Okay. I remembered that it was something like that, and I couldn't remember what you were using those funds for, but I knew it was something really special. How many kids have you been able to help like that?
Oh, I would say more than 60. I have 45 right now, but several have finished, and a few of them have gone to college, but I don't pay for college. I don't have the funds. But I do make sure that each child finishes high school.
Wow. That's really beautiful to hear that you've been able to help them. I remember there's so many there. They're older now, and some of them still call you Mama.
They all do. Now they're calling me Grandma.
Yeah. Well, I know that's been a huge blessing for them. And you've always had the women and the children on your heart. I remember when I was walking on the streets with you, everybody knew you. When you do your rounds and you're out there walking and going to get groceries and things.
Well, I like to meet people.
Yeah.
And so, yes, I still walk every day. And I still have lots of friends in the stores and on the streets all over. And in the churches. I just like to do that. I like people.
I can remember going out to get bread, and people would say, "Introduce him to me. Who is this guy with you? Is he your son?"
Yeah. Yes, that's true. They always are very interested. And, of course, you are. When you're here, you're my son, whether you like it or not, or my grandson, because if you're younger.
Yeah. I remember you saying specifically to me about what it's like when you go back to the United States and you see how people waste so much. If you're in a place like Kenya that is so poor, that makes a big impact on you. And that's something I share when I'm in a third world country and I go back. It's such a culture shock to go to the United States. What's that like for you?
I don't know. I don't feel like I know how to be an American anymore. I've forgotten. And seeing people eat out of garbage cans every day and sleeping on a piece of cardboard on the side of the road with a piece of plastic over them, and seeing them so poor with absolutely nothing to eat, and then going back to America and seeing how wasteful everyone is, it really, I think, wow, we have no idea how God has blessed America.
Right. And you see that every day there.
I see it every day. Every day. There's not a single day that I don't see it. My own grandchildren, they tell me they want this or that costs $200. I think $200 will send one of my kids to school for a year. You already have 20 of those. Why do you need another one?
Yeah.
People here are looking in the garbage cans just for anything to eat.
Yeah.
And the stuff I see them eating is so disgusting. I would like to take pictures, but I'm afraid to offend people.
Yeah, I know you helped me get a little bit of video footage. We saw people, oftentimes someone who's drunk, and they're in the gutter.
Well, most of the time, people in the gutter because they're chained by sin, and they don't know any other life.
Yeah.
It's Christ who changes our lives and makes us different.
You're right. We sure appreciate what you do there as far as being the link between Final Frontiers and the ministry there, and you're always so punctual and getting back to us with emails. And I know Daniel and Michael really appreciate you. They're so thankful for your work.
Well, I'm thankful for them because they make such a difference in these men's lives. They have no clue what a blessing they are.
Yeah. I'm sorry that you have to talk today when you've got a sore throat and a cold, but I sure appreciate you talking to us.
Well, come and see me. I'll talk your leg off, okay?
Yeah, I remember. I was there. We talked a lot, and you took care of me. You let me stay in your home. You fed me.
Yeah, I enjoy getting to know you. It was very nice. I'll always remember you.
Thank you. I always remember you, too.
In your heart.
Yeah.
Well, it was nice talking to you. And it's starting to rain, and sometimes with rain we get electricity goes off, and so just in case that happens, it is nice, and you pray for our work, that it'll keep on growing.
Yes, we're praying. Thank you. You have a good night there.
Yeah, you too. And thank you for all you all do for us. It's a real blessing. I try to stay caught up.
Yeah, it's hard.
I'm working.
I know, you're very busy.
Hey, because it's important.
Right. Most important thing in the world.
All right. Thank you.
Okay.
God bless you.
You've been listening to the Final Frontiers radio show, funded by sponsors like you. Thank you so much for joining us. Through the funding of national and native preachers, we endeavor to effectively advance the gospel where it has never been preached before. If you want more information, visit www.finalfrontiers.world. That's finalfrontiers.world.